Hello and welcome back to Paleocast. My name is Dave Marshall and this is episode 82, Dinosaurs of China, in which we're given a guided tour of this exhibition with its curators, Dr. Adam Smith and Dr. Wang Chi. This interview came about after both a listener request and an invitation from the curators themselves, so how could I refuse? In it, we discuss the exhibition's conception, how it was all put together, and cover a lot of the details of the dinosaur to bird transition, particularly in light of what we know from Chinese dinosaurs. As with most trips around the museum, mine ended in the gift shop, where I managed to pick up a copy of the book of the exhibition that I got both Adam and Chi to sign, as well as a copy of 6 Little Dinosaurs, which is a storybook and figurine set. For your chance to win these prizes, please give this episode a like on our Facebook page. Now, we're only going to count the likes on our original post, so you first got to like our page, then like the episode 82 post on there. We'll pick a winner at random on the 31st of this month and announce it in the next episode, so good luck. If you like the idea of winning paleo merchandise or have enjoyed the Paleocast art competition in the past, please consider donating to the show so that we can buy in new prizes and cover the international shipping. If you're in the UK and want to visit the exhibition Dinosaurs of China, then it's running until the 29th of October at Wollaton Hall in Nottingham. For everyone else, we've got pictures on our website that'll show you exactly what we've been talking about. If you like this kind of episode, please let us know. If you want to hear anything else in particular, please get in touch. We love receiving any of your feedback. And as always, please subscribe to us wherever you can. We've got some great content coming up soon, and you won't want to miss a thing. Hi Adam, Chi, thank you very much for having me here. So, can I start off this interview the same way that I start off every interview, is just getting an idea of how you guys got into paleontology, what was your route, what did you study, and yeah.
Well, I can begin. So I was always interested in paleontology, dinosaurs in particular, from a very early age. My dad used to take me fossil hunting in Lyme Regis and Wren's Nest in Dudley. And so even as a youngster, I was collecting fossils and curating them, giving them little labels. And that love for paleontology and fossils never left. And so I went to university to study paleobiology in Portsmouth. After 3 years there, I moved to Bristol, where I did a master's in paleobiology and evolution. And that's where I started to generate a passion for plesiosaurs in particular,
Right.
which became my academic speciality when I pursued that in my PhD on plesiosaur evolution in Dublin. And from there, I sidestepped from the world of paleontology and academia into working in museums.
And you're still a paleo curator, yes?
My job here at the Nottingham Natural History Museum in Wollaton Hall is curator of natural sciences. So I'm responsible for the museum's collection of 750,000 natural history objects. My particular focus is on the 40,000 fossils, of which we have a little bit of dinosaur material, but not very much. And that's why I was particularly excited when Wang Chi approached us with this idea of doing an exhibition of dinosaurs from China to try and make that a reality.
And Chi, how about you? Is it something similar?
Not really. Dr. Adam Smith is a paleontologist and he's very professional, and I'm a big fan of dinosaurs since I was a boy. But I graduated as an architect. So I got my undergrad degree and master degree all in architectural design, and I got my PhD degree about architectural language in the University of Nottingham. So I'm working in the University of Nottingham as an assistant professor in architecture. So you might feel like quite strange why architects get involved in the dinosaurs. That's all because, firstly, my personal habit is on the paleontology, and I got a lot of knowledge about the paleontology. And at the same time, my research areas is focused on the museum narrative, especially the natural history museum narrative in the space. So I believe the paleontological exhibition have to work with the space, because the big dinosaur skeletons has such a strong feeling of the space organizations. And only you can work the space and the skeleton together, you can tell the story in a better way. So I got a long time collaborations with the Institute of the Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology in Chinese Academy of Sciences. So that's why I come across with the idea like they have the feather dinosaurs, they have amazing collection of the dinosaurs, so why can't we bring the dinosaurs into our local museums? And then since then, I start to work with Dr. Adam Smith, and we work quite well.
That's great. I find it really interesting that you can tell a story through how you lay out museum exhibits. Is that a very common thing to do? If we went to any museum, is it likely that the exhibitions are set out in a way that they would tell stories, and most of the time we might not realise that's the case?
Yes or no. I hope lots of curators in the museums can realize the importance of the space or spatial organizations in the museum, because only when you understand the potential of your gallery space, and you can make the whole stories weaving into this space better. But in the reality, lots of buildings, especially the new museums, are designed by the architects, and these architects only design an empty shell. And then the curators step in to do the following work about how to actually design the exhibition inside. So somehow the conversation or the dialogue in between the architects and the curators is lacking. And this is why I think when I work with Adam Smith, and he's a professional curator in paleontology, and then I'm an architect, my knowledge and his knowledge can work quite well together. Yeah.
Woloson Hall is also a particularly unusual building to generate an exhibition in, because it is an Elizabethan mansion. It wasn't designed to be a museum building in the first place. So some of the rooms are huge. We've got a great hall, which is massive, but we've also got lots of smaller rooms dotted around the building. So from an exhibition point of view, that raises a lot of challenges, but it also led to a lot of creative decisions as well, because sometimes you're forced to think creatively when you have a challenging space to design in.
Sure, and if people aren't familiar with Wollaton Hall, we've got a lot of international listeners, where might they have seen this?
Well, Wollaton Hall is also better known as Wayne Manor. So in one of the most recent Batman films, I think The Dark Knight Rises, it features as Batman's house. And so a lot of our visitors come here because we're a film set, we're a movie set, and a lot of people are surprised when they come inside Wollaton Hall and find lots of dead animals and, at the moment, dinosaurs. They're wondering where all of the Batman memorabilia is. But in fact, Wollaton Hall is an Elizabethan mansion, and so we have all of these different identities. So we've got the Wayne Manor identity, we've got the Elizabethan mansion architectural identity, and then we've got our natural history museum identity. And so we've got all of these different identities competing with each other. And so from my perspective as a curator, I want to do as most as we possibly can with that natural history identity, and that's another reason why I was so keen to bring the dinosaurs from China to Wollaton Hall.
Especially from the architectural aspect, if anyone has been a little bit familiar with the history of architecture, they will know the Wollaton Hall is one of the finest examples of the British Renaissance architecture. So we don't have a lot of Renaissance architectures comparing with Italy or the continent in Europe, but we do have some kinds of very nice examples, and Wollaton Hall is one of them. And we also have a very special, space inside, and then that kind of the tall hall, very high space, is not really often seen in a historical building. So it does have a very high value of the architectural history. Yeah.
We wondered also, could this be the oldest building that has ever hosted a dinosaur exhibition? We're not entirely sure if it is or isn't, within the UK anyway, but it could well be.
Yes, the buildings finished or completed in 1588. That's actually 16th century. much earlier than the Natural History Museum in London, which is finished in 1881. So yes, I doubt. I just think that's probably the earliest building has ever hosted a dinosaur exhibition in there. Yeah.
So it is very nice inside, it's quite beautiful, it's very spacious, and it does have a lot of smaller rooms. It's not how you'd imagine, like if you walked into the Natural History Museum in London, you've got a giant hall. So this seems to be a lot smaller. So why did you decide that this would be the best place? How did this exhibit come around?
I probably can start these questions. And Nottingham University has a long-standing research relationship with the Chinese Academy of Science. And IVPP, the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology, Paleoanthropology, is part of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. We start from the museum narrative, and then we think their dinosaurs is really good, and we want to bring their dinosaurs to British museums. But we just think Nottingham is exactly the proper space to display it, not only because we have a nice natural history museum locally here, but also based on the research with the universities, and we have such a strong foundations to build on the top. So it's actually, for me, it's the best place. Yeah.
So all the specimens that you have on display come from China. How did you go about getting them on loan?
So the specimens in the exhibition, there are three types of specimens. So there are 3D mounted skeletons. These are or casts. Then there are real fossils, including the most important feathered dinosaurs. And then there are casts of flattened fossils as well. And so of those three types, we've got a third of each. We selected the individual skeletons and fossils from the collections of the IVPP, who provided us in the first place with a long list. So we handpicked the specimens to tell the stories that we wanted to tell. The main narrative of the exhibition is one of ground shakers to feathered flyers. In fact, that's the tagline of the exhibition. And in a nutshell, that's what the exhibition is about. So it's how ground shaking dinosaurs have evolved into feathered flying dinosaurs, including birds today. But it was really through Wang Chi's connections with the IVPP that we were able to build up that trust to loan these specimens from China.
It's probably worth saying we used to have another Dinosaur of China exhibition in the UK. That was in 1986. So it's exactly 30 years ago. And in the last 3 decades, there's a lot of new discoveries about the paleontology in China, especially they found soft tissues on the fossils preserved in J-hole biota. And that changed the whole picture of our understanding of the dinosaurs. And so in this exhibition, we really want to combine historical superstars, which found from the 1930s, 1950s, or 70s, and also the new superstars found in 1990s or the new century together, and then tell the new story of the exhibition, and tell the new story of the dinosaur evolution. Yeah.
So they're all from the same place? No? They're all from...
So the vast majority, everything apart from one, is from the IVPP, but there's one specimen that's not, and that's the Gigaraptor. So the Gigaraptor skeleton is from another institute called the Longhao Institute of Geology in Inner Mongolia. So there are two institutions involved. So the collaboration is a collaboration between the University of Nottingham, represented here by Wang Chi, the Nottingham City Council, represented by me, and the Nottingham Natural History Museum at Woloson Hall. They're the two main partners in the UK. And then our partners in China are the IVPP, our primary partner, but then also the Longhao Institute. So the specimens are from two different Chinese places.
And then if we talk about the locations where they found the fossils, they actually come even wider range of the different locations. For example, the Mamenchisaurus and then a few other dinosaurs are coming from Sichuan province, which is the southwestern part of China. And then the Lufungosaurus is from Yunnan province, which is very close to Thailand. It's very southwestern. And then many feathered dinosaurs are coming from northeastern part of China, the J-hole biota. And also we have a lot of specimens found from the desert, including the Gigaraptor and the Raptors, which is belong to the Inner Mongolia. So it's a very wide range of the areas. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like a load of specimens from all over the place geographically. Was there anything in any other museums that you would have liked to have displayed, but you didn't get the opportunity to?
I don't think there was actually, no. I think that all of the key specimens that we wanted, we've been able to get. So what we certainly wanted was a ground shaker. We wanted something that was big and represented sort of the old view of scaly, large dinosaurs, because that's still true. There were still large ground-shaking dinosaurs, and the dinosaur that we have to represent those ground shakers, our Mamenchisaurus, is the tallest mounted skeleton of a dinosaur that's ever been on show in the UK. So I think we've ticked that box. When it came to the feathered dinosaurs, it was important to have the real things. So we wanted to have genuine fossils of the dinosaurs with the soft tissues preserved, including the feathers, and representing those we've got holotype specimens, which are the first specimens named and described. They're the representatives of the species. And so we've got the holotype of Microraptor, Guai, and we've got the holotype of Cordipteryx, Dongai, and many other real fossils as well. So we've got that box ticked as well. So in terms of the narrative that we wanted to tell, we've got all of the specimens that we really needed.
And holotypes are incredibly valuable to science. Were there any special conditions of being loaned these specimens? Do you have like 24-hour guards and laser tripwires?
It's not quite as sophisticated as laser tripwires, but we do have a system of security in place for 24 hours, and we are completely aware of the high risk involved in having an exhibition of real type specimens like this. As a curator, that's given me a lot to worry about, but thankfully we're close to the end of the exhibition now, and we've had no incidents, and I don't expect that we will have anything go wrong, but it's a constant source of worry for me as one of the curators.
Some specimens in this exhibition is actually very, very important, like the type specimens of the Microraptor. We can say that's a diamond on the paleontological crown. IVPP really trusts us, and we have built up a very good working relationship with our Chinese colleagues, and they give us a sort of freedom to display these specimens. They haven't set up some kind of very strict conditions for the security, but from our insight, we do care about these specimens, and we know the safety of these things are very, very important, and we put a lot of attention on that. Yeah.
One of the stipulations, of course, was that the specimens must remain inside cases for the duration of the exhibition, and that includes for any researchers who wanted to come. So the IVPP have said to anybody who wanted to study these things in detail that they have to go to the IVPP to see them there, which is fair enough. So people are welcome to take photographs of the specimens through the acrylic cases, but we can't take the cases off, and we are not able to handle them ourselves. So all of the movement of the fossils and the specimens is by the Chinese technicians who install and will later deinstall the objects in the exhibition.
So you've got Chinese technicians that come in and do all of that stuff. Did they bring the specimens over? How did they all arrive? Did they get shipped over in a big cargo ship?
Well, the whole thing, we have a lot of crates, and all the crates has been put into one very big container, and they spend 50 days on the sea, traveling from Beijing to Nottingham. And then the technicians come on the day to install them, and they spend 7 days to install everything for us. So that's a really interesting process. Yeah.
One of the challenges of being in a building like Woloson Hall is the space. And so we had the question of where are we going to store all of these large crates that the dinosaurs are arriving in. We got around that problem by incorporating the crates into the exhibition. So half of the crates are being used as plinths, essentially, for the dinosaurs to stand on and to give the exhibition a sort of authentic feel, almost like the dinosaurs have just burst out of the crates. And then the other half of the crates are used outside in a marquee. So they're shouted from the outside environment, and they're used in our Dino Explorer Zone, which is where we have all of the children's activities. So again, because we don't have much space inside to do activities for the children.
mounting big dinosaurs like Mamenchisaurus, especially the tallest mounted dinosaurs in the UK, is a very interesting experience, especially for our Chinese technicians. And they said they really need to care about the two things. First, they need to mount the whole dinosaurs without any mistake, and at the same time, they need to look after the buildings. And they can't actually knock onto our decorations and then damage any piece of the buildings. Both sides is very important. And they said they never had this kind of experience before. They really enriched their working experience, and that's really, really worth doing so. Yeah.
We don't have a sort of dedicated entrance for large specimens because we're an Elizabethan mansion, we're not a custom-built museum. So all of the specimens came through what's essentially a double door, just a standard-sized double door. We've got no lifts, so we had to install scaffolding on the outside of the building to forklift truck the objects onto so that they could be slid through these quite narrow openings. So all of these things were challenges, not just for us, but for the Chinese technicians who visited to install the specimens.
It really sounds like building a model ship in a bottle.
That's very much what it's like. That's why it was so important to have somebody like Wang involved, whose speciality is museums and space and narratives.
So in this episode, we're going to take a little walk around the museum, a guided tour, if you will. So we've just walked into the main hall. The first thing that we see is this giant dinosaur. Should we start off with that one? Is this the start of the exhibit?
Well, there is a set route through the exhibition. It runs through from the ground shakers, through several galleries, onto the balcony, so you go up in the building as you move through the exhibition. So there's a free flow approach to visitors in the individual spaces, so they can explore the individual spaces in any order that they wish, but they experience each gallery in an order. So we can begin with the Mamenchisaurus if you like. So this giant dinosaur in the middle of the room is the Mamenchisaurus. It's 23 meters long from the tip of the head to the tip of the tail, which is actually far too large to fit inside Woloson Hall, the Great Hall, in a normal walking pose on four legs, which this dinosaur would have, usually been found on. So that's why we were able to negotiate with the IVPP to have it mounted in this rearing pose, leaning back onto its tail with its arms and its neck in the air. So that makes it 13 meters high, and that is the tallest mounted dinosaur skeleton that's ever been on show in this country. For reference, that's the same height as 3 double-decker buses sitting on top of each other. So yeah, an amazingly large animal. In fact, we had to bend the neck down slightly because it's so tall, and we didn't want its head to be scraping the ceiling.
So that really typifies the ground shakers element of this exhibition, yeah?
Exactly. So the skeleton is actually a cast, so it's a perfect replica of the original bones, but we do have real bones of dinosaurs as well throughout the exhibition. And in the case of the Mamenchisaurus, we have a thigh bone on the right side of the animal because it's the right thigh, so it's the equivalent bone to the one that is directly above it. And this is on open display, so visitors can touch it, feel what a 160 million year old dinosaur bone feels like, and they can measure themselves against it as well, which if you're a young child is quite spectacular. The bone is bigger than most of our younger visitors.
Sure, it's pretty interesting as well that you've got this dinosaur bone just on display and that just anyone can touch. Are you not worried about it getting damaged? I mean, we'll do a virtual touching, everyone can listen.
Yeah. No, we're not too worried because it's been specifically selected by the IVPP as a handling object. So bones like this are particularly robust, and they're all treated as well, so they're not going to peel away or pull apart or anything.
And do you think it's an important thing for the visitors to be able to get their hands on some of these exhibitions?
Yes. For the exhibition types, we think we can have the eyes-on exhibition, which is very traditional. The people cannot touch it, but they can see a lot. That's often happened in a lot of traditional museums. And also we have the hands-on objects, and people can really touch them and feel it. And feeling a real Mamenchi thigh bone can give a lot of kids a very special feelings. And then when they touch it, I think they probably feel like I travel through the time, go back to the 150 million years ago. And then how can you actually standing along with such a kind of giants? And then what's the relationship in between our human being with these giants? So lots of questions can pop out.
Yeah, I think it's important to have tactile elements of any exhibition because it makes the connection between the visitors and the objects a lot stronger, and people just naturally want to touch things. So we want to give people the opportunity. That's really quite difficult in an exhibition of quite delicate dinosaur bones. Most of the specimens have to be behind glass or behind barriers just because they're so delicate. But in certain cases, like with the Mamenchisaurus bone, we can make an exception.
And so looking around this exhibit, we've got some other things. Lophengosaurus, is that pronounced right?
It's a Lophengosaurus. Apart from the giants standing in the middle, we have the relatively smaller dinosaurs standing around it, and every corner represent secondary stories. The Lophengosaurus actually talking about development of the paleontology in China because that's the first ever dinosaur has been discovered, mounted and studied by Chinese scholars. C.C. Young, or Professor C.C. Young, is a father of the paleontology in China, and he found Lophengosaurus in 1939 and mounted in 1941. That's actually the high time of the Second World War. This middle-sized dinosaurs actually helped to hold the national morales during the war, because in 1941, so even under the war, so lots of people went to see the dinosaurs and they feel really, really curious. I think that's really quite similar with what we call keep calm and carry on in Britain during the war. Yeah.
And what story does this specimen tell in itself?
So the animal was a plant-eating dinosaur. The reason why we put it here at the very beginning of the exhibition is because it's one of the oldest dinosaurs. So this dates back to 200 million years ago, the very beginning of the Jurassic period. And in fact, most of the dinosaurs at the very beginning of the exhibition are Jurassic. So one of the themes is that you're moving through time as you are exploring the exhibition. The second story is that this was the early discovery. So we're discovering the dinosaurs in the same order that they were discovered, very roughly.
Okay, and another one that I can see that I can actually pronounce this time is going to be Protoceratops. So what's the story with this one? Is this a real model? Is it a real specimen? Is it a cast?
Protoceratops and the Panacosaurus, they all found from the desert. So this corner is actually talking about the story of the desert. Especially we want to combine the story of the dinosaurs and the story of the discovery, how the paleontologists walking in the wild, in the field together. Protoceratops is an earlier type of the horned dinosaurs, and there's plenty of them living together as a herd, a large herd, in the Jurassic time, or Cretaceous time, is it? Yeah, Cretaceous time. And then the Panacosaurus, next to it is a real fossil. We especially want to show it because that's showing a working process about how the paleontologists collect it from the wild. The whole fossil is still half covered by the plaster jacket. And also on the plaster jacket, you can see there's a postal address. The expedition team found it from the Inner Mongolia and cover the whole specimens by the plasters and send it back to the laboratories in Beijing. So on the plaster, we can still read Professor Zhang Miman, Beijing PO Box 643. It's sent by the Chinese Academy of Sciences expedition teams in Mongolia. So.
And it's good because it's on the shipping container, as we said before, that it came in. So we've got the address where we know to send it back to.
The dinosaurs, the Protoceratops and the Panacosaurus, one of the other themes that they represent is the similarities between Chinese dinosaurs and more familiar dinosaurs to Westerners, so North American dinosaurs and European dinosaurs. So Protoceratops in particular is a horned dinosaur. It's an early relative of Triceratops, which will be much more familiar. And the same is true of the Pinacosaurus, which we know from Ankylosaurus. The Lophengosaurus here has close relatives in Europe in Plateosaurus, and then the Mamenchisaurus has close relative in Diplodocus. So all of the dinosaurs here have close relatives, and in the exhibition we tie that to the paleogeography of the time. So back in the Triassic and Jurassic periods, the continents were of course more connected in the supercontinent Pangaea, which is why all of the dinosaurs in China and North America are so closely related, belong to the same families.
And all of these dinosaurs that we've just spoken about are all herbivorous, but over in the corner we've got our theropod, and that's Sinoraptor.
Sinoraptor, exactly.
I'm sorry for my pronunciations. I'm not a dinosaur worker.
Some people are pronouncing it Sinoraptor, some Sinoraptor. It's like Diplodocus or Diplodocus. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. There's multiple ways of saying it. But the Sinoraptor is one of the largest meat-eating dinosaurs from China, and it lived at the same time and in the same place as the Mamenchisaurus. So we've got the large plant-eating dinosaur here, standing facing in the other direction. It's not paying attention, while the meat-eating Sinoraptor is sneaking up behind it. And we're asking visitors the question of whether they think a big dinosaur like this would have guts to attack and try and eat a Mamenchisaurus like this, even if it's not paying attention. It would have to be careful because the Mamenchisaurus has defensive weapons. I mentioned before that the Mamenchisaurus is rearing up onto its hind legs with its arms in the air and its neck raised up high. And there are two possible reasons why this might have happened, although there's a lot of speculation about whether it was really possible. The first, of course, is to reach up to tall trees, to reach leaves that other dinosaurs can't reach. And the second possibility is maybe related to defending itself from predators like Sinoraptor. So on the end of its forelimbs, it has quite sharp claws, and by rearing onto its hind limbs and onto its tail, it might have been able to use its arms, almost like a boxer, to defend itself using its sharp claws.
This special scenario is designed to create another type of the exhibition, so we call it a Manzang exhibition. You can see apart from the eyes-on object and the hands-on object, and we also create the stories. In the whole exhibition, so we deliver the scientific message to our visitors. And at the same time, we leave some freedom for our visitors to create their own stories. So what happened in between the Sinoraptor and the Mamenchisaurus? Will the carnivore hunters successfully get the prey, or will the giant Mamenchisaurus defend herself and defeat the meat eater? So that's a kind of open questions. So we leave it to our visitors, and we actually collect a lot of answers from our visitors, especially the children's. They give us a lot of very interesting feedback.
One of the few skeletons I personally can actually recognise is that of an ostrich. And why is this one in the gallery along with all the dinosaurs?
Well, the ostrich, of course, isn't a dinosaur from China, but it is a dinosaur. At least we hope to convince people that it is by the end of the exhibition. So the ostrich here is from our existing collection of bones in the Nottingham Natural History Museum, and it's in the exhibition. It is facing off against a small, similarly sized dinosaur called Guanlong, which is a relative of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And the spot the similarities activity that we have here is to invite visitors to try and look at those similarities in the bones of prehistoric dinosaurs and modern birds. So some of them are very obvious. At a glance, you can see they both walk on two legs, and they have long toes with curved claws on the end. They've both got quite long necks, which are S-shaped. They've got pointed snouts, and if you look in detail at the bones, in the backbones, they have hollows, so they've got similar structures to the bones. So on that theme of dinosaurs evolving from ground shakers into feathered flyers, in this section here, we're looking at the evidence from the bony anatomy.
Moving through into the second room of the exhibition, we can see a lot more dinosaurs, but these are modern ones, yes?
This is our bird room, or our bird gallery. So this is what we call the museum of the museum. This is what the Nottingham Natural History Museum would have looked like very roughly when it first opened about 100 years ago. And so this seemed like an appropriate place to display the dinosaurs from China that have connections to the story of behavior. So in the previous gallery, we looked at the evidence connecting dinosaurs and birds from their bony anatomy. In here, we're looking at evidence that connects them through fossilized behavior.
And completely surrounded by these modern birds is Oviraptor. So what kinds of behaviours do we see in Oviraptor that link us to the modern birds?
One special thing about these galleries, you can see a lot of dioramas, the small dioramas around. They are all talking about the nesting behavior of the birds There are different species, but every species is showing as a little family. So they have an nest and eggs and parents around. Oviraptor is very special because when this species lived and it's living as a good parents, and they actually nesting a lot. The name of the Oviraptor is a bit of very interesting story behind it. The Oviraptor means they are the sift of the eggs. They're actually hunting on the eggs. But that's because we found the fossils actually after the eggs. And then in the later discoveries, we actually found this is not a kind of right name for this species. They are not actually after the eggs. They are not actually eating these eggs. They are protecting these eggs of their own. So the Oviraptor is actually very good parents. And why we can find this kind of form of the fossils preserved in that position, because the animals are used to living in the desert, in the oasis of the desert. And when the sandstorm hit them, and they try to actually crouching on the top of the eggs and protect their offsprings. But at the same time, if the sandstorm is too heavy, and they will be buried. And the whole thing, the whole animals with the nest with the eggs will be frozen in time. So this is why we found the evidence of the Oviraptor, and also we see the Oviraptor's behavior is very similar with the modern birds, the nesting. Yeah.
And we've also got an incredibly tiny specimen, Mei Long. Can you tell us about this one, please?
So yeah, we've gone from the giant 13-meter high Mamenchisaurus in the room next door into this gallery with the Mei Long, which is the tiniest dinosaur in the gallery. It's only 15 centimeters long. It would fit in the palm of your hand. And the reason why we put it on display here with the bird dioramas is because it's preserved in a very special curled up pose with its arm covering up its head and its head tucked around to the side of its body. So it's in a sleeping or resting position, very much like modern birds. So if you see a duck sitting by the side of a lake, you'll often notice it sits with its head tucked underneath its wing, and this dinosaur is behaving exactly the same way. And you can also see its tail is wrapped around its body as well, so it's literally curled up in a ball like a bird.
Lots of fossils you found from China is preserved in a very good condition. And from my eyes as a curators, all these kind of well-preserved animals look like frozen in time, and also tell sort of tragic stories because they died immediately in an instant way. Mei Long is preserved when he's or he or she is sleeping. Obviously, probably been covered by the volcanoes and killed immediately without any response from that disaster. But that actually helped the scientists now know how the dinosaurs sleep. And that's the first time the paleontologists can understand how the dinosaurs are sleeping from the solid physical evidence.
So what we have here is in our first gallery, the ground shakers section, we've got the evidence connecting dinosaurs and birds through the bones. Here the evidence is in the behavior, but we haven't yet in the exhibition seen any smoking gun evidence that dinosaurs had feathers, and that's the topic of the next gallery.
So now we're going to explore some of this evidence, and the first specimen that we come across is Sinosauropteryx. Can you tell us what's special about this specimen, please?
Well, the Sinosauropteryx is one of the many dinosaurs that lived in the Yehal biota about 125 million years ago in northeastern China. And there's a huge mural on the wall here which shows Sinosauropteryx alongside many other feathered dinosaurs. But you might notice in the background there's a ground-shaking dinosaur, scaly ground-shaking dinosaurs, just like the ones we saw previously in the Jurassic section of the exhibition. So these feathered dinosaurs have not replaced the ground shakers. They've just become part of a much more diverse picture of dinosaur biology and evolution and diversity. The reason why the Sinosauropteryx that we're looking at here, the real fossil of it, is so important is because this is the first dinosaur species that was discovered with feathers. So previously we knew of Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx is a bird with dinosaur-like features of its skeleton that were found with feathers. But the Sinosauropteryx is a true dinosaur, and this has feathers. The feathers are not like the modern bird feathers of the wing, but if you look closely, you can see along the top of the tail and at the tip of the tail, there's very fuzzy tuft-like feathers. So these are what we call proto feathers. And it's why these fossils are so important, is because they preserve not just the bones and the hard parts like bones and eggs, but it's the soft tissues as well, including the muscles and the skin and the most important part, the feathers.
Sinosauropteryx was described and published in 1996, and that's one of the that's one of the how would I say that? That's one of the feathered dinosaurs that have been studied in a lot of details, but it's still we have a lot of paleontologists working on that. Our specimens is not the type specimens, but it's much larger than the real type specimens. It's almost 1.5 times bigger than that. So it's showing even more details comparing with the type specimens. Before we take these specimens from the IVPP to here, it's still under the study by the paleontologists back in their laboratories.
Examining Sinosauropteryx, one of the immediately obvious thing is that it has colour patterns to its tail. What would those have been used for?
So this is related to the topic of why feathers evolved in the first place, if not for flight. Obviously flight came a lot later. This fuzzy animal wasn't using its feathers for flying. So what was it using its fuzzy feathers for? Well, two possibilities. One is related to the stripes on its tail, which is evidenced by looking at the microscopic structure of the preserved feathers, which contain melanosomes. And the melanosomes are organelles in the cell which contain pigments. And the shape of those correlates to particular colours in modern day feathers. And so we can use this as evidence that of the colour of the animal, and maybe that colour is connected to showing off and displaying. Just like modern birds are very colourful and use their feathers for showing off, maybe Sinosauropteryx did in the Cretaceous period. The other possibility is that it was using its feathers for thermoregulation, so maybe just for staying warm. And I think that the temperature, the climate in northeastern China at this point in time was actually quite seasonal. It was very similar to northern Europe today. So there would have been cold parts of the year, and so feathers might have been particularly useful to help keep it warm then.
And another detail that I've just spotted is that there's a little fossil fish next to one of its feet. What does this tell us about the depositional environment?
Well, it's not just one fish. There's actually a few fish dotted around. If you look closely, you can see there's 3 in total. So just around the feet. And this obviously tells us that it was deposited in a watery environment, so a lake environment. The deposits themselves, they are ash, volcanic ash. And so this area of lakes was surrounded by volcanic activity, which would have preserved the animals in this fine detail. So the environment is directly connected to the fine preservation of the fossils.
And where's the tip of its tail off to? That seems disconnected.
There is something interesting going on at the end of the tail. So the tail sort of ends and then continues a little bit further on, and then it continues back in the same orientation of the original part of the tail. So the taphonomy of the Liaoning deposits is still under analysis. So we're still trying to understand the process of fossilization. But what this is telling us is that the fossil, the animal, is being disrupted post-mortem.
And if we turn around now, we've been sneaked up upon by an absolutely giant dinosaur. What's this one?
This one is a Gigaraptor, the largest bird-like dinosaurs we ever know right now. It was found in 2005, so it's a quite new discovery, and also it's a superstar in the paleontological circles. In 2005, the found of this dinosaur is a bit of background stories over there. Firstly, Professor Tan Ling and Professor Xu Xing from both the Long Hao Institute of the Geology and the IVPP want to act into a Japanese television stations we call NHIs, how the paleontologists are working in the field. So they went to the desert, and then they found a piece of the bones tucking out from the ground, and then they think that could be a very often see dinosaurs in the desert, and they say, well, now we will act how we dig it out, and then we would act it through digging out a real bone rather than a cast or replica of the bones. And obviously, the Japanese television is very happy. And when the professor is actually digging the bones out, the more and more bones revealed to their eyes, and they realize that's not often see dinosaurs, and actually that's a new species. So they certainly stopped the whole process of the documentary. And in the later 2 or 3 months, they dig out probably 60% of these giants, and they realize that's actually a new species they never ever see. The whole thing is published in 2007 and been ranked as the number 6 of the top 10 scientific discovery of that year. So it's really, really astonishing discoveries.
We think this is the largest feathered dinosaur that's ever been discovered. It's about as high as a giraffe. So this was a really huge feathered creature. And we know that it had feathers, not because we found the feathers associated directly with Gigantoraptor, but its very close relatives, the Oviraptorosaurs, to which this group belongs, they do have feathers preserved. So there's that smoking gun evidence that Oviraptorosaurs had feathers, so there's no reason to think that the Gigantoraptor didn't have feathers either.
That's phylogenetic bracketing.
Exactly, yeah. If your close relatives have feathers, then you probably did as well.
One interesting thing about the Gigantoraptor is our Gigantoraptor is actually the first time for this dinosaur being displayed in a proper public museum. So it never ever been showed in the public museum before. And then if you go to China, you can't find the Gigantoraptor in any of the public museums. It's only in 2009 the Gigantoraptor replicas has been displayed in a dinosaur expo show in Japan. But that time, the dinosaur was put in a sports stadium. It's not in the museum. So our museum has this kind of priority, to show this great dinosaur.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have specimens like the Gigantoraptor and some of the other dinosaurs, which have never been on show outside of China before, and certainly not inside the UK. And I think it's important to clarify as well that this is not a touring exhibition. So this is people's one and only opportunity, probably in their lifetime, to see some of the most important dinosaur fossils that have ever been found. It's Nottingham or nothing.
There is only one individual of the Gigantoraptor been found so far. We never found the second one. But last year we went to the original site where we found the Gigantoraptor. That's actually on the bank of an ancient river in the middle of the Gobi Desert. There's no drop of the water, but you can see there's a river bed in the middle of the desert, and then there's a big digging site where they found all these bones. But we actually can find the little debris of the bones around the digging site, and we don't know whether that's a bit of the Gigantoraptors. So you can see in the middle of the Gobi Desert, if you go over there, so even right now, the remains of the dinosaurs is still quite often to see and easy to be collected.
Okay, if we move over here now, we see that we've got another real specimen. What's this one?
So this is the holotype specimen of a small dinosaur called Cordipteryx dongai. So this one is important because, again, you've got a beautifully articulated skeleton, but in addition to the bones, you've got the feathers. And in this dinosaur, the feathers are very bird-like, so they're almost indistinguishable, really, from modern bird feathers. So this tells us that dinosaurs had feathers, and Cordipteryx feathers were very wing-like. Of course, this dinosaur was not a flying dinosaur because its wings are really tiny, and in fact, all of the dinosaurs that we've looked at so far that had feathers were flightless. So this is a flightless dinosaur that tells us that Gigantoraptor was feathered. Something else that's very special about the Cordipteryx fossil is that there are stones preserved in the stomach region. These are gastroliths. There are maybe 100 or more of these tiny little stones that it swallowed to help it to digest its meals. That's probably helpful when you don't have strong teeth for chewing food. These animals really were just creatures with beaks. And so again, this is evidence of behavior in extinct animals. So these dinosaurs, just like modern birds do, and many reptiles as well, were swallowing stones to aid with their digestion.
Comparing the Cordipteryx and the Gigantoraptor is a very interesting thing. because the Cordipteryx is coming from the Gigaraptor, which is about 125 million years ago. And then the Gigaraptor is much later. It's come from almost the end of the Cretaceous time. And then in the evolution of this type of the dinosaurs, what we call it Oviraptor sauria, we think the feathered dinosaurs are supposed to be evolved smaller and smaller. So this is why the Gigaraptor's discovery is actually a surprise for everyone. We never know, in almost the end of the Cretaceous time, there's such a kind of 8 meters long, 5 meters high feathered dinosaurs still living around the world. And actually the Cordipteryx and the Gigaraptor belong to the same family. And then you can see the dinosaurs evolution really sometimes is going to the different roles and surprised us.
So the Cordipteryx is a holotype specimen, so the name-bearing specimen, the original one that was described, it's one of 2 type specimens that we have in the Dinosaurs of China exhibition. The other one is the Microraptor guai.
And what story does this one tell? I know it's a famous, very famous dinosaur, but have we now started to see dinosaurs fly?
Well, yes. Basically, the answer is yes. So all of the other dinosaurs, the Cordipteryx included, were flightless. The Microraptor is a dinosaur that could fly. We know that it's a dinosaur because it has many dinosaur characteristics. It has hands with 3 claws. It's got teeth in its jaws. It's got a long bony tail. And if you look closely at its feet, it's got these enlarged sickle-shaped claws, which are a characteristic of the dromaeosaurs, or the raptors. So this is a raptor dinosaur. It belongs to the Dromaeosauridae. But we also have really good evidence here of feathers, very long bird-like feathers, wing feathers essentially, on the arms, but also on the legs and on the tip of the tail, and around the chest as well. So this was a dromaeosaur, a raptor dinosaur that had bird-like feathers and could fly.
And it had 4 wings. That's fairly unique, isn't it?
It's 4 wings. What it tells us is that dinosaurs were experimental in their approach to flight. So some dinosaurs had 4 wings. Birds, of course, have only 2. But there were other dinosaurs that explored flight and evolved flight completely independently of birds. So Ichi is a dinosaur, for example, that evolved wings, but they weren't wings formed by feathers. They were wings formed by a membrane, more like a bat. So I think Microraptor and Ichi, 2 dinosaurs in this exhibition, tell us that the evolution of flight was a time of exploration in the dinosaur evolution.
There are plenty of the Microraptor has been found from the Gigaraptor right now. I believe that's probably 200 more times Microraptor has been found. And another interesting story related to the Microraptor is the Archaeoraptor. And we have this Archaeoraptor replica, the fossil Archaeoraptor replica here, but it never ever been real animals that existed before. So Archaeoraptor is actually fake. That actually tells what happened in the Gigaraptor. Almost all the fossils has been deposited underneath the farmland. The Gigaraptor is covered by sweet corn farmland everywhere. So the farmers actually can find a lot of fossils doing their labor work. And in the earlier time, in the end of the 1990s, someone dig out special fossils. It's actually in piece. And the farmer tried to actually put all the different pieces together and form something look quite integrate. And this is Archaeoraptor. And that one was published on the National Geographic in 1999, and we think that's a missing link in between the dinosaurs and the birds. Until later time, the paleontologists actually found this is not a real existing animal. The upper part of the Archaeoraptor belonged to a species called Yangonis, and then the tails belong to the Microraptors. So that's actually the two different species that has been putting together. We even don't know what happened to the Archaeoraptor's legs. That belong to something we even haven't known about. Yeah.
So the reason why we put the Archaeoraptor here on display alongside the Microraptor, which is a real fossil, and the Yangonis, which is another real fossil, is because these two real species were incorporated into the Archaeoraptor composite or forgery.
So with Microraptor being a holotype, and with there being hundreds of other specimens preserved, how did you manage to convince the museum to let you have this specimen that's so important?
Well, it was a direct product of the trust that we generated through Wang collaboration with the IVP. But we wanted to make sure that we had the authentic original material. We wanted this to be an exhibition with as much scientific integrity as possible, and having the type specimens was one way of demonstrating that.
So we mentioned Ichi, and we have an actual specimen here. What's so special about this one?
Ichi, what we're showing here is not a real fossil. That's actually a replica, but that replica is coming from the 3D printing. Ichi is the only specimen of this species, and the real fossil is very, very fragile. It comes from some kind of very thin layer of the plates, and then now the real fossil of the Ichi is conserved, it's stored in the laboratories. No one can touch it, and even no one can study it from the for details, because it's very, very fragile. Any touch on that could damage it. So originally, we really want the real fossil of Ichi come to us, and IVPP agreed. We really feel quite happy for that. But later on, when IVPP handled this specimen, they found that's almost impossible to do that. So they scanned it and they print out in several times to try to reviewing all the details. Because each is a fossil, first it's very fragile. You can't put the wax on that to make a detailed cast. And the second, it's not really deep. If you look into the details, the whole fossil is very thin, and then all the tracks, all the details on that is very, very shallow. So even if you scan it and print them out, it's not really that way to show the details. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So although it is a 3D print, that's quite interesting, because it's a new technology. It shows how new technology, laser scanning fossils, can help to shed light onto fossils and to make them more accessible to people around the world, either digitally or as 3D prints like this. It was important for us to have Ichi in the Dinosaurs of China exhibition because it tells us a lot about the evolution of flight in dinosaurs. So we previously looked at the Microraptor, which is a dinosaur with wings very much like a bird with feathers, and the Ichi has a different kind of wing with elongated fingers, and those long fingers supported a membrane-like wing, even though this belongs to the same group of dinosaurs, theropods, the meat-eating dinosaurs, to which birds evolved from. It shows that flight was evolving multiple times. And so in the exhibition we've got the Ichi and the Microraptor, alongside also a pterosaur, which is another type of animal that lived in the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods that evolved flight. So the story here is about flight and why flight evolves multiple times.
Ichi was described and published in 2015. So compared with all the other dinosaurs in this exhibition, Ichi is the newest one. It actually represents a different type of the flying, and that's very, very surprising.
I think it's worth noting that, as you said, that it is a different way of flying. It's more like a bat, I think, in terms of how the wing membrane would be spread around the fingers. But also it's got the feathers as well. So that tells us that the feathers weren't intrinsically linked to flying at that time. Is that right?
Exactly. So that fits in with the story of the other fuzzy dinosaurs that we've seen that couldn't fly. So flight and feathers, the use of feathers in flight, evolved later on.
And then a couple of other specimens that we've got here are Protoceratops and Confuciusornis. What's the story with these ones?
Well, these two fossils are birds. So these are true birds that lived in the Jurassic period. And we're here actually standing on the balcony of the Great Hall, overlooking the ground shakers down below. So the Mamenchisaurus, you can see, if you look up, you can see it's directly above our heads, peering over the balcony, almost like it's saying hello to its modern descendants, the birds. So we're hoping that by this stage in the exhibition, people will have received enough information to convince them that birds are indeed descended directly from dinosaurs, so technically birds are dinosaurs. And these real fossil birds here on the balcony show the anatomy of the earliest birds. They still retain many dinosaur characteristics. So the Protopteryx, for example, still has teeth in its jaws, and it also has claws. But it has lost the long bony tail, which was one of those dinosaur characteristics that we saw in the Microraptor. In the case of Confuciusornis, it has lost its bony tail. It's also lost its teeth, but it retains its claws. So the evolution from dinosaurs into birds is becoming blurrier and blurrier the more evidence we find. So drawing a line between where one ends and another begins is becoming much more difficult.
And coming into the final room of the exhibition, what do we see, and what's the story that we're telling here?
Well, this is one of our existing galleries. So this is our Africa gallery. So we're surrounded by African animals, including a gorilla and a giraffe and a diorama. We're leading people through this gallery at the very end of the exhibition as a sort of conclusion. So there are two key points to make. Firstly, dinosaurs aren't extinct, because birds are dinosaurs, and so the birds in the dioramas here, we're interpreting them as modern-day dinosaurs. But of course, many dinosaurs did become extinct, and the giant ground-shaking dinosaurs are extinct. And when they became extinct, it left their niches open for other animals to exploit. And in this particular case, it was mammals that were able to evolve into those roles, and so that's why we've sort of shoehorned in some of our large African mammals, including the giraffe, because the giraffe is sort of the modern equivalent of a large, ground-shaking, long-necked dinosaur that spends its time with its long neck browsing in trees.
So to conclude then, why is China so good for dinosaur specimens? Is it just that it's got the right rocks, the right lithologies, the right ages? Is it collector effort, that there's more people digging and more of an effort to try and find dinosaurs? What is it?
It's a combination of all of those things, really. So yeah, it's certainly an increase in collector effort. People are looking for things now which they haven't always done, and I think that's why over the last 20 or 30 years things have really taken off. Excuse the pun. But that's not the only factor. The other factor is that China is a huge country. So there's a lot of ground to cover, and so the chances of finding a fossil, if you're going to find it anywhere, then China's got a lot of area. The other important consideration is that the Yehol biota is preserved in a lager strata. So these are very special conditions where the fossils are preserved not just in huge abundance and in fine detail, but with all of the soft tissues preserved as well because of the fine nature of the sediment. And so China is key to our understanding of dinosaurs because of the unique nature of the deposits that preserve all of the fine details that most deposits around the world don't preserve.
And also worth saying, China got the large populations, and also most of the lands is covered by the farmland, especially the Yehol biota, and then the other parts is very rich for the fossils. And in the earlier time, the science of populations is not really that developed in China. It's only recently, in the last 20 or 30 years, the popular science, especially about the dinosaurs, become so interested by the public. So not only the scientists, but also the general public or the normal peoples, they know what is fossils. So when the farmers actually working on their land and dig out that special things, printing, special rock with the printing of some shape of the animals, they realize that this is a part of the paleontology, and that could reveal some knowledge or the message from the many, many years ago. So this is probably why from the last 30 years, and paleontology actually developed so fast in China. It's not only because the paleontologists are working hard, but also because the amateur paleontologists are working quite hard as well. Yeah.
So what does putting on this exhibit do for Nottingham, for the public here? What does it do for our listeners? What are the stories that you want them to go away having learned?
Well, the key objective to our exhibition from an educational perspective was to challenge the general public's view of dinosaurs as ground-shaking, scaly dinosaurs, and to try and popularise the view of dinosaurs as being much more diverse, and many of them being feathered and birds literally being dinosaurs. And that's why we specifically titled the exhibition Ground Shakers to Feathered Flyers. That's exactly what the message that we wanted to get across to the general public.
I probably can say our exhibition is very unique in terms of talking about the evolution of dinosaurs from the ground shaker to the feather flyers. Even back in China, back in the IVPP's museum, such a kind of topic is not there emphasized. It's not actually highlighted in the museums. Feather dinosaurs is showing in one corner in the IVPP's museum, but we use the whole Natural History Museum with 26 specimens all getting together to talk about these stories. And also we put a lot of effort to talking about the diversity of the dinosaurs, and also show the public the vision of the dinosaurs has been developed into a new stage. And all this kind of narrative haven't been shown in the museum back in China. Especially by the end of this month, when the exhibition finished, most of the dinosaurs will go back to the storeroom rather than put back in the museum on the public show. So lots of specimens has never been displayed before, even in China. So this is why we are quite particular.
I'd say also one of my objectives was to raise awareness about Woloson Hall as a venue for natural history. So we have a vast collection that not many people know about because we've got all of these different identities. So yeah, even people who have heard of Woloton Hall might not also realise that it's the home of the Nottingham Natural History Museum. So the Dinosaurs of China exhibition was a way for me as a curator to get the word out about Woloton Hall as the Nottingham Natural History Museum, and to generate an interest in people visiting to see our existing collections, and to try and encourage other people to take an interest in bringing more of the collections that we have behind the scenes and putting our existing collections on display in the future.
And from a Wollaton Hall perspective, a Nottingham Natural History Museum perspective, has this exhibition been a success, and are you likely to be able to do something as ambitious again in the future?
In terms of visitor numbers, it has been a success. So I know that we've just surpassed 100,000 visitors, which for a relatively small provincial natural history museum is great for a period of just over 3 months. There's still a few weeks left, so last-minute visitors are still welcome. But in terms of visitor numbers, yes, a huge success. And as a result of doing this, as you say, it's an ambitious project. It's almost unbelievable. I can hardly believe that we've got some of the specimens that we have got on display here. So if we've achieved this, we really believe that we can achieve anything. So we've got lots of big ideas for what we might be able to do here at Woloson Hall in the future.
Probably worth saying, so we have a satellite exhibition alongside with the Wollaton Hall main exhibition venue. It's in Lakeside Arts on the campus of the University of Nottingham. That's relatively small, but we celebrate another different topic, which is paleo art. You can see we are celebrating the feathers in here, and then how the artists reconstruct all these prehistorical animals in an artistic way is very important. And paleo art becomes something quite powerful to deliver these messages. Back on the campus in the Lakeside Arts, we have another 2 specimens showing over there. One is Dilophosaurus and another one is Axosaurus. Both of them has a different depictions in the previous times, and now we think the dinosaurs could look different. So the paleo art could be one of the potential topics we go deeper in the future.
We're also, of course, very keen to explore our existing collections, and we're in the process now of redeveloping our existing public galleries. So we should hope that within the next 2 or 3 years we will have new displays, permanent displays of our existing collections as a direct result of the interest generated in natural history through the Dinosaurs of China exhibition.
Well, guys, thanks very much for taking me around and taking all of us around. It's a wonderful exhibit, and so if you are in the area in the UK, please make sure you get down and check it out. And thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Paleocast was brought to you by Dave Marshall, with Joe Keating, Laura Soul, Liz Martin-Silverstone and Caitlin Colery. It was made possible by funding from the Paleontological Society and the Paleontological Association, but the show now relies on contributions from you, the listeners. If you've liked this episode, please consider donating, and thanks to everyone that's helped out so far. We'd also like to thank the Ocean Collective for use of their music. Please visit paleocast.com for the supplementary material to this episode and for our archive of past programmes. Subscribe to our Twitter feed @Paleocast and like us at facebook.com/Paleocast to get all the latest news.